Okay, here we go. Writing the equations of lines, flip lesson number 5. So today's flip lesson, we're going to be looking at word problems. So let's go ahead and read this. 10 times as many girls than boys receive tweets from Katy Perry at any given time. Now, I just made that up. I'm not sure that's true. Complete the table with possible combinations of girls and boys, and then write an equation that represents all the possible combinations. So just imagine if just one boy receives a tweet from Katy Perry. How many girls would receive a tweet? 10 times as many, right? So 1 times 10 is 10. If 2 boys received a tweet, well, we know girls would be 10 times as many, so that'd be 20. So I'm just making a table given the slope, right? 10 times as many. So each time a boy would receive a tweet, 10 times as many girls would. So if there are 3 boys that receive a tweet, then 30, etc., etc. So here's our table. And from our table, we can, of course, find the slope, right? We can do the hoops. 40 minus 30 is 10. 4 minus 3 is 1. Because we know the table represents a linear relationship, we don't have to keep doing the hoops. We're done. So we know our slope is always the hoops on the right, so the change in y over the change in the x column, which is 10. And now we just need to make a table to find our y-intercept, and we're done. So we know that the y-intercept is where x is equal to 0. We can take this point right here and put it into our table. And we know that the slope, now this is something that some people are having trouble with in class. Here's the deal. When we see that the slope is equal to 10, that means that, even just looking at this table, right, as we move down the table, our y values are increasing by 10, right? 10 plus 10 is 20, 20 plus 10 is 30, 30 plus 10 is 40. So that's why when we see that we have a positive slope, that means as we move down the table, we are adding by that slope. And we don't want to move down the table though, right? We want to move up the table so we can find out what's in this spot. So we do the opposite when we move up the table. When we move up the table, we're subtracting by 10. 10 minus 10 is 0. Well, look at that, right? The y-intercept is 0. So if I put it all together, I could write y equals 10x plus 0. But probably the best way to write it is y equals 10x, which makes sense when you stop and read this word problem. Let's see what's behind here. Okay, so this type of context problem gives us just the slope, and we find the y-intercept by making a table. This next type, let's go ahead and read it. Macy is going to the movie with friends. I'm going to make sure I didn't skip anything. There we go. She decides to buy popcorn and candy for the whole group. Popcorn costs $4 and candy costs $2. So write an equation that represents the possible combinations of how many of each she can buy if she has $50 to spend. So this is a different type of word problem. And the reason why it's different, it seems like we're given 2 rates of change, right? How much does popcorn cost? It costs $4 per popcorn, right? So if I ordered 2 popcorns, it'd be 8. If I ordered 3 popcorns, it'd be 12. And then we're also getting a second slope for the candy, right? The rate of change would be 2. If I'm going to buy 1 candy, it's $2. 2 candies, $4. 3 candies, $6. So when we see this, we're actually going to set it up in standard form. Okay, do you remember standard form? Standard form was AX plus BY equals C. Now, just writing that kind of seems like, whoa, Miss Overby. You don't have to remember the A, B, or C. You're just going to remember that we're not going to write this in slope-intercept form. We're going to write it in a different form. So here we go. When I see that popcorn costs $4, I'm going to write 4P. Because think about it. P stands for the number of popcorn that I buy. Popcorn, I guess the popcorn boxes that I buy. And so 4P would represent the cost, right? If P is 1, because I'm buying 1 popcorn box, it'd be $4. 2, if P is 2, it would cost me $8. And then also, let's go ahead and switch to a good color here. Let's see, how about pink? All right, so here we go. Now we're going to look at the candy. Okay, the candy costs $2 per candy. So I'm going to set that up as a separate value. And I also know, let's go for a, and I also know that they've told me she has $50 to spend. So I'm going to put that 50 over here, right? So I want you to think about, we're going to take the amount that it will cost to buy popcorn and the amount that it will cost to buy candy, and we know that that's going to be equal to the total amount that she has. She can't spend over $50. She doesn't have over $50. So right now, this is the equation. We're done. This is the equation that represents this type of problem. Now we're going to practice this type a lot because I admit it's new. But your job when you do the flipped lesson is to follow my line of thinking, to write the things down, and sometimes I would like you to pause, pause right now before we go to the next one, reread it, and try to understand why I wrote down what I wrote down. Even explain it to yourself, okay? So here we have another type of a word problem. Josh's bearded dragon lizard grows 0.25 inches per month. After 8 months, it is 16 inches. Write an equation that represents the relationship of the total length of the lizard and the number of months. And so with this, it's different, right? This type of context problem gives us the slope and a point. And then we're going to find the y-intercept through our table. So it says it gives us the slope. Can you guys recognize where the slope is? That's right here, the 0.25 inches per month. When we see the word per, that really gives it away that we're talking about a rate of change. We're talking about a slope. So we know that our slope is equal to 0.25. So every month, the bearded dragon lizard grows another 0.25 inches. Then it says that we have a point, right? It says it gives us a slope and a point. So we're looking at these two numbers, and this is a point. Our point is 8, 16, where the x part of our point stands for months, right? And the y part of our point stands for inches. So they gave me a point. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do something. I need to use, if I have a point and I have a slope, and I know that I want to put all of my equation into the y equals mx plus b form, and I realize, okay, I've got my point. I know that I have to make a table to find my y-intercept. So let's go ahead and make a table. So what we're going to do here is this. We're going to have to make a pretty tall table, right? Because we know that our y-intercept is going to be found right here. Whatever y is when x is equal to 0 is our y-intercept. But the next point that they give me is an 8. We're going to have to do a lot of jumping, aren't we? So we're going to go ahead. Now, some of you can do this intuitively in your head, and that's awesome. I'm making a table for the rest of us who like to make tables and be absolutely sure about our answer. So once again, our slope is 0.25, which means as we move, let's change this so we can have a different color. As we move down the table, right, we would be adding 0.25 because that's what the slope means. But we want to move up the table. We want to work backwards so we can get to the y-intercept. So that means we're going to be doing the opposite of the slope. We're going to be subtracting 0.25. So let's start here down at 8. We know that when x is 8, y is 16. So that means at 8 months, the dragon lizard is already 16 inches long. I know, right? They can get that big. I have one at home. So let's go backwards to see what was the length of the lizard when he was born, right? Or when she was born. I don't know if this is a boy or a girl. So let's start working backwards by subtracting 0.25. All right, 16 minus 0.25 is 15.75. If I subtract another 0.25, I've got this. You can use your calculator to do this. You can do it in your head. Hopefully I'm doing it in my head, so I hope I'm not making any mistakes here. And finally, 14. Okay? So what we just did was we found the y-intercept, and in this word problem, the y-intercept stands for the length of the lizard when he or she was born. So let's put it all together, right? That is my b. B is 14. That's important. I already know my slope is 0.25. Let's put it together using a new color. Let's see, I used to have a great color here. Too much time. Let's do that. Let's do a bright, bright green. So here we go. Let's put it together. Our slope is 0.25. That goes in front of our x, and our y-intercept is 14. So that took a lot, but nothing new, right? The newest part is just to read through and know that this 0.25 is my slope, and this, the 816, is a point that I can put right there in the table. We're going to practice more of these when you get into class, but once again, it might make sense to pause the video and kind of go over it again so it makes sense to you. All right, so here's another one. It costs $185 for a 2-month country club membership and $457 for a 6-month membership. Write an equation that represents the relationship between months and the total cost at the country club. So this is a type of problem that actually gives us 2 points. I know you're like, Miss Overby, where's the 2 points? Well, I'll show you where they are. Right here and right here. Okay. Now, it says $185 for 2 months. I am not going to write 185.2. I am not going to write it that way. We'll get the wrong answer. We have to go back to what X and Y stand for. Do you remember way back, we talked about it at the beginning of the year, but you also talked about it in middle school. You know, when you're looking at the X column and the Y column, any number you put in the X column is called the independent variable, okay? We can put anything in the X column, but the Y column is the dependent variable because it's dependent on what we put into the X column. And so when you think about time and money, well, guess what's the independent variable? Time. Time is always independent, right? We can't stop time. We can't change time. It's just keeps on ticking. So months are going to be our independent variable. So when we write our points, we're going to put the time first, and then we're going to put the dollars second. So instead of time, of course, we're talking about months. So when we take this information right here, we're going to write it as 2,185, which makes sense. For 2-month membership in the country club, it will cost us $185. Now, can you see the second? The second point is this. For 6 months in the country club, it's going to cost us $457. So it's really, really important to know to put the months first before the dollars. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take these 2 points and we're going to put them into a table, and we're going to find our slope. Oh no, I don't have a calculator. All right, I'm going to pause and grab a calculator, and I will be right back. Okay, I've got a calculator, and so now what we're going to do is we're going to do our hoops. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my independent and dependent so it doesn't get in our way. So let's do our hoops. And when we do those hoops, we're going to say 457 minus 185, and we see that we have 272. And then when we do the hoops on this side, 6 minus 2 is 4, and we know that slope is rise over run. That's why, see how this is the Y column? The hoops give us the change in Y, right? And so if rise goes over run, then the change in Y, which is 272, goes over the change in X. I always remember it, rise over run, change in Y's over change in X. Rise and Y's rhyme, so that's how I remember it. So let's go ahead and do 272 divided by 4. And we get that that's 68. So we have a slope of 68. All right, we're almost done. We have the slope, but we don't have the y-intercept. So we are going to go ahead and make another table. We're going to make a table to find our y-intercept. We know that our y-intercept is where whatever y is when x is equal to 0. And we're going to use our point that's the closest to 0, right? So we don't know what y is when x is 1, but we do know when x is 2, y is 185. So we're going to look at our slope, and we're going to notice that since our slope is 68, that means as we move down the table, we would be adding 68. That would make sense, right? If 2 months is 185, then 3 months would be $185 plus another 68. The more we move down the table, the more expensive, right? This country club's going to cost us. But we don't want to move down the table. We're not interested in knowing how much the country club costs in 10 months. We want to know, what is the initial cost? What's the y-intercept? So we're going to work up the table. And when we work up the table, we do the opposite of the slope. If we're adding by 68 as we move up down the table, then we're subtracting by 68 as we move up the table. So let's get our calculators out, and we do 185 minus 68. We get 117. We do 117 minus 68, and we get 49. That is our y-intercept. So now we're going to put these two things together. Let's finish in a bright pink. All right, so we're going to bring these two together. We're looking for the y equals mx plus b formula. We know that our slope is 68, and our y-intercept is 49. So let's put those in, 68x plus 49. And that, my dear students, is your answer. Okay, so in class we're going to practice these and more. I am noticing that students are coming in, even though they say they've watched the flipped lesson, they're not prepared in the way that I'd like. So make sure that if you went through this and you were confused about one of them, go back into the video and listen to that part again. Show up in class prepared to work on these types of problems. Thanks for joining me.